My name is Maikiko James. I'm the Director of Programs at Women in Film in Los Angeles, or WIF. Welcome to this year's 2020 10th edition of FICG in LA, now the Guadalajara Film Festival in Los Angeles. Thank you so much to all of the supporting organizations. The festival's new mission is to show the best of Latin American cinema and open doors for emerging Latinx creators with the intention to cultivate a borderless film industry. I will be moderating this conversation at Masterclass Her Gaze, and I'm so honored to introduce our participants. Here with us today is Gia Coppola, Director of Feature Films Palo Alto and Mainstream, Patricia Riggen, Director of Under the Same Moon and The 33, and Yulene Olaizola, Director of Tragic Jungle. So I'm so thrilled to be having this conversation with you all. As we know, the entertainment industry has quite a ways to go before we hit gender parity. But I think what's really inspiring and thrilling about our moment is we see the talent and ability of female filmmakers, for decades, and now really having a spotlight on so many wonderful filmmakers like yourselves. And so we really want to kind of explore those themes and topics that have come up in your work, and how you define your trajectory and your creative visions. So I'd love to hear just from each of you about your backgrounds, what drew you to filmmaking, and how do you find yourselves where you are now? Why don't we start with you, Gia?
Okay. I guess I started because I was really shy and really bad at school, and then when I decided to apply for photography class at college, and then that really kind of opened things up for me where I could kind of have an excuse to be an observer, and I had this amazing professor that really just kind of made it about enjoying learning and involving many different things of life into your work rather than kind of learning all the technical things. And then from when I graduated, I just felt like I really wanted to challenge myself further, and filmmaking felt like kind of an extension of photography where I had more challenges that, you can, and it's a collaborative space where I could, it's everything that I like too, it's like costumes and music and trying to get better at writing and story, and trying to kind of understand yourself is such a, it's a torturous art form, but I love it.
We love it too. We're glad you're doing it. Patricia, what about you?
Well, I'm from Guadalajara, in fact, where the film festival is from. And that's probably one of the reasons why I started thinking of film, because many years ago, I don't know, maybe 25 years ago, I heard about film. There was no film school back in Guadalajara then. And more importantly, women weren't supposed to leave their homes to go study what they wanted. So I really couldn't study film. I became a producer in Mexico because I had a really strong calling to be in film. I just didn't know in which capacity. And since I had never seen a woman director, it just did not occur to me. Of course, the doors were closed, really, really well shot for women at the time. I was, I had a few opportunities and they were denied to direct. I became a producer, a writer, and I had a very good job, but I was really unhappy. And that's when I thought, I really need to discover, like, who am I? Am I a writer or a director? And I went back to school. I left Mexico. I went to New York. I went to Columbia University, and I enrolled in this program that I could do everything just to see what I liked. And of course, the moment that I directed, I just knew that was what I've been waiting for, all my life. And I haven't done anything ever since. It's been probably 20 years or so since I went to school, and I'm a director. That's all I like and love and do. And it's been a really, really challenging couple of decades. I could say I have suffered plenty, and now it's a beautiful time. I think it's the best moment for women. I'm really happy to see women in the panel and all the women that are coming up making movies, and people are not being so cruel, as they used to be. So I'm just really happy to be supportive.
And I think you've truly been a pathmaker for so many women directors. So we're excited to learn more about all the things that you've worked on and are working on now. Yulene, what about you? How did you get started?
I think it was in high school when I was starting to take photography lessons in the high school. And suddenly one day I remember my father told me that Jim Morrison, because I am a big fan of Jim Morrison and the Doors, my father told me that he went to the film school in UCLA. So that was the first time that I realized that you could actually study cinema as a career. And then two of my best friends decided to try to get into the film school in Mexico City. So I just went with them and I just followed the flow. And I realized that cinema could be a profession and an official career. So I just did my try. I managed to get into the film school until my second try. I was still very naive. I was 18 years old. I was the youngest in my class. And I didn't know anything about the history of cinema or the big and great directors of our times. So I started very slow and with a very naive approach. But suddenly I was making my first film at 24, and I haven't stopped since then.
Wonderful. I really appreciate all of your personal stories, and also I think you all touched on themes of discovery, right? The possibility of cinema and film as a career. And I think as women, it isn't, as Patricia touched upon, as apparent for us. The examples of directors, even now in this current time, still generally skew very male. And I think the breakthroughs that are happening right now are so important. I wonder if each of you could speak a little bit to, while you are all filmmakers, right? You're not women filmmakers or female filmmakers, you're filmmakers, but who happen to be women. If you would speak to, the theme of this conversation a little bit and your gaze, and how if it has, being a woman influenced the work that you do? And also, are there contrasts to, say when you've worked with male filmmakers that you see or bring to your work that you think maybe would be particularly feminized, or because you are a woman, you think you bring something additionally dynamic or just distinct from your male counterparts who do this work? Patricia, why don't we start with you? We know you've worked with many people and many types and formats over the years too, so I'd also be curious to hear how the dynamics change in the different formats.
Yeah, so you want to know about the female gaze, if there is one?
If there is one, sure, and how you would just define it for yourself.
I think there is one. I definitely think there is one. That's not to say that we all have the same voice or talk about the same subjects or anything, but I do think that in my particular case, I have a taste and I have a life experience that for sure determines what I like. So I naturally gravitate towards a certain type of characters, of stories. And I believe that, women in film, particularly in directing, are very important because we naturally gravitate to female characters. So therefore, that's not to say that we don't make movies about men too, which we do, but there just will be more stories about the female experience if there's more women directing than men. I also think that we have, a certain style, a certain approach. I particularly see it in the way I work. I have noticed over the years that men, they're very male, they're very territorial. They want to mark, they want to pee all over the place and prove themselves and show, everyone that they're in charge, they're the boss. And I don't say this lightly, I have been very observant over the years. I made a movie about 33 minors. So I spent a lot of time, months with all these men together. and I just kind of studied them, and I noticed that we're different, and those differences have made us really vulnerable in men's eyes, because we're not ones to go have to prove ourselves. We just are. You know we have our talent, we might have our insecurities, but we know what we're doing. We're not out to just be proving ourselves like men do. And therefore that's interpreted as maybe, not the biggest talent or lack of confidence or other things that it's really not. So the problem with the gays is that we do live in a patriarchal society where every single criteria has been determined by men, white men particularly. So, I think it's just a good thing that we are getting in there, and we're changing things little by little. Things are not gonna happen immediately. It's very important that we don't stop this fight, that we don't stop the pressure of being allowed to be a part of the narrative of our times. Because if we stop fighting, it will go away. And so I don't know if I answered the question.
No, absolutely. You answered the question. I think all of those points are so important. Staying present, staying visible, and continuing to do work, I think really is how we address the dominant paradigm of it being mostly a male gaze in the foundation, and transform it to be balanced, right? And having the female and non-binary gaze at that. Yulene, I wonder if you would talk a little bit about this, especially in your film Tragic Jungle. I think there's, a very strong undercurrent of this, of the female character, but also surrounded by men. And I think you also have maybe referenced it in that experience shooting the film with that many men on set. Would you want to talk a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, actually for me, it's funny because for me, it's easier to speak about male characters. I don't know why. I always struggle a little bit more when I work with female characters. And this is the first time, this is my 5th film. And this is the first time that I choose like a very strong female character, and that I speak about the relationship between men and women in this way. So I'm used to, I think it all depends on how was your life growing up. In my case, I've always been confident surrounded by men. Since I was a little kid, I used to play football. So I was all the time surrounded by men playing football, and then in cinema. So I just became comfortable with those situations where suddenly you are the only women surrounded by men. And that can be, as Patricia says, you can feel very vulnerable, but also that can give you a lot of strength because you are the only one. And being the only one and being the different one can give you a lot of power, especially when you know how men behave around women. If you handle that, you can control or enjoy that power. And so this film that I made, Tragic Jungle, speaks about that also, about a female character that is surrounded by men, and suddenly she decided to transform this vulnerable situation into strength, and to take control of the situation and take control of those men who behave in a really manly way, always trying to mark their territory, as Patricia said. But in my case, when I started to study cinema, things were already changing, I guess. And I didn't have to struggle for being a woman inside the industry. And all of the films that I have made are completely outside of the Mexican industry of cinema. Most of my films are really homemade. I choose my own crew, since the first people in the electricians and the staff till the post-producer. So I've always chosen people who I know is going to respect my work, and that it's not going to be a problem just because they're going to minimize my work or to give me less attention just because I am a woman. So I think I've been very lucky in my experience, but it's just because I have constructed that in the way I decided to make films in a very independent way and with small crews, never inside the big industry or mainstream.
I think that's also really an important and significant point around ownership and creative license, and how much control, as you mentioned, we can have over the situation and dynamic of the work we're creating. And so I really applaud you for the ability to keep making your stories in that way. Gia, what about you? How has gaze affected your work?
I guess for me, I was, I'm raised with a family of filmmakers, and my Aunt Sophia was really making movies when I was younger. And so to see her kind of work in a way that was very true to her personality, she's more soft-spoken and my grandpa's very loud and whatever, but I think watching her kind of be herself made me kind of feel like there's a rope for me and I can do it in a fashion that feels true to my personality. And I guess, there are still circumstances of like women are just bred differently. We have different kind of makeup inside and the way we process things. And I think sometimes the more that I work, I kind of notice that sometimes the female kind of approach of just communication isn't really as understood as I anticipated. And because I'm not a ball buster or loud or, whatever, I'm my awkward kind of feminine self. And sometimes that's harder to process and get kind of, it's more of a fight and a struggle to kind of get my way. And as like to what Patricia was saying, it's like I'm reading this book, Women Who Run with Wolves, and it's so much about like these folklores of women and sort of how the matriarchy really shifted into patriarchy, and that's our culture, and how it's our duty as women to kind of regain that essence and instill it. And I think like what I've been learning so much is like having a community of women and getting to talk to them about their process and experiences, and also just like giving back and fellowship, and that kind of space has been so inspiring. And it's not about just like there's only room for one of us, when I think maybe in the past, because it was such a struggle to get to that place, it kind of felt like there wasn't enough room for women. But now it's wonderful to see how much it's shifted, and how many more opportunities there are, and only hope for more of those stories, because it's such a fulfillment.
I think that also it's a beautiful development in the collectivism or communal nature, I think, of women. As I've worked at WIF, I also really think that nature is coming through, right, to do work as community and to as women support each other. So I thank you for bringing up that point as well.
I was going to say that, Gia, I think it's a very good point that you brought up, and something that we always have to keep in mind, which is we need to bust the myth that women don't help each other, because that's a male, again, narrative. And we need to help each other. And one of the ways to help each other is to know each other. And, events like this one, or organizations that put together women, are super important, because if we know each other, it's easier, it's even easier. But we should just do it, arbitrarily, to any woman that's around, to lend a helping hand, just like men have through history. So anyway, that's a really good thing to always keep in mind. We just need to help each other.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's another dynamic that we see changing, especially in these turbulent times. None of us can go it alone, right? We really are going to need to depend on each other to make it through. Another topic that I think is important for this festival, and as in my work in advocacy in the entertainment space, is representation, right? And where we know we are lacking, in particular as women of color, all across the board in Hollywood, directors, writers, but also executives and decision makers, and given where we are in California, how large the Latinx community is, the underrepresentation of Latinx creators is really quite abysmal. And I wonder, again, for each of you, thinking about the stories and how your cultural identity has informed your work, but also thinking about the diversity, right? You can't, Latinx identity is not a monolith. It's very diverse. There are many different countries and ethnicities that we're thinking of when we say that word. How has that informed your work as well? And does it carry forth for you an importance in terms of the types of stories you tell? Yulene, why don't we start with you?
That's a difficult question. I don't know. In my case, it's weird to explain that because I come from a medium class white family. My grandparents come from Spain. Maybe I don't have like in my face and in my blood this very typical Mexican roots. But since I started to make films, I always felt attracted to unknown places, remote locations where the weather is crazy and where the geography defines the people who lives there. So that made me travel around Mexico and also in other countries to find remote places where I want to shoot. So in this case, for example, in this last film, I shot in the border between Mexico and Belize. And that took me to work with Black people, Black female characters and male characters also from Belize, also indigenous people from Mayan communities. And it's not just it's not that my roots are connected to them because I live in Mexico City. I'm completely far away in the way of thinking and conceiving the world, for example, with an indigenous Mayan young guy from the south part of Quintana Roo. We live in totally different universes. But one thing that I really love about cinema is that the power that has to travel in time and in places to be able to bring the audience close to these places, for example. That's what attracted me the most about cinema. So one time I am making a movie with indigenous Mayas in the south part of Quintana Roo. And then in my previous film, I was shooting with indigenous Nahuas people in the center part of the country. So for me, cinema is just a medium of curiosity and a way to share with other people what you discover. And in my case, it's been a lesson every time I make a film. And I don't know why I have this curiosity, being a white female from a medium class level family that comes from Spain. But I just feel this curiosity to know other people and to learn from them. And cinema is a tool for that.
And I really think that that's an important understanding too, because you have a different understanding of what society is being from Mexico City, and I think you knew to even make Tragic Jungle, right? I think there's an importance there of understanding that those were narratives that called to you and your curiosity, and that's it's an information that I think, you know, I really enjoyed watching the film because it was a world that transported me to some place I'd never been. And I think, you know, it wasn't necessarily something that me as a girl from California would have thought or could even have conceived of. So there really is an importance there as well. Patricia, you made some really seminal and important films, especially for the Latinx community here in the States. How has this informed your work? And also, how do you see it changing?
Mm-hmm. Well, as you know, the statistics lately talk about the fact that Latinos have been erased in representation, you know, both behind and in front of the camera in Hollywood. So nothing has changed yet from when I started to now. There's not really been any, I think, progress in terms of Hollywood opening their doors to Latinx filmmakers or stories, with of course some exceptions. So, you know, but at the same time, I do think that right now there is a acknowledgement, like a new conscience, I guess, of the fact that those doors have been shut, and Latinos, even though we are a big part of the country, a big part of the population. Actually, the biggest minority in the country right now is Latinos. We still don't have our stories being told. I personally, of course, started my career with a very Mexican experience movie in LA, right? When I moved here from Mexico, it just was shocking to me to find millions of Mexicans living in LA, literally millions. And I also noticed that they were all the servants of the city, right, of the state. All the service people were Mexican, and all the people that they were serving were the white Americans. And that just made me reflect a lot on our community. And that's why I made Under the Same Moon. Ever since, I haven't really had a chance to do more Latino work because I have been working professionally, not independently, and I want to go back to independent. I miss that. But because I have been working, as a hired gun, there's no Latino, so there's not a lot there that you can do. But now it's a good time. I do think that we need to start pushing those stories forward again. I think there's an interest in opening. Right now, Latinos, is very important that we make ourselves heard. I think that we have a lot to learn from the Black community, from the African American community that has been very vocal in demanding, taking control of their narratives and making sure that they're represented. I think we have to learn from them, and also, as a community, kind of get together and fight the fight and get our stories in there. So I do think, cultural identity will hopefully, be important for filmmakers again soon.
Absolutely. And Gia, how about for you? Has cultural identity played a role in your work, and how does that continue to evolve for you?
Both of these answers are both so important and interesting. And I'm obviously a white woman, but I think for me, like the greatest joy in life is to learn, and that is when I feel happiest. And I think cinema, as it said, that it's a tool to travel and to educate yourself. And the more that we can get unique and diverse stories is such a gift to our culture. And it's so disappointing that like we haven't gotten the chance to get exposed to that. Like I'm my friend Iris here, who's one of the curators of the festival, like she was telling me about some of these old old Mexican films that like I can't watch because they don't have English subtitles, and like that's so unfair. Like I want to watch those movies and I want to be exposed to that. And so I think it's so much about like making space and spearheading. At least my duty is to like make sure that there's room for those sort of women and stories and to only shepherd it more so.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the duty is on all of us, right, as storytellers and the arbiters of the narratives that come forward. We really do have to be sharing as many diverse stories as possible. We're almost at our time, but I just wanted to close by asking each of you briefly, because it is a masterclass after all, if you have any words of wisdom for rising filmmakers right now. Just what would you tell someone, especially in the time where we are all virtual right now? How would you advise young filmmakers or new filmmakers to be furthering their career in this moment? Patricia, why don't we start with you?
Well, I like to first talk to women. I love that Yulene, who came a decade after me, had that confidence and that clarity and of what she wanted to do and had that access. So I love that the new generations have that. But in case they don't, here in the US for women, is to trust themselves, to not let anybody say no to them, to just do what they want, go for it. And to Latinos, in the US, this is also very important, men and women. I don't think we have to see the Latino culture as a handicap anymore. We need, or being a woman, we have to claim it and we have to use it, you know, for our advantage. I do think people now are interested in new visions, in diversity, and it's a moment to be very proud and to bring everything that we can, you know, that makes us special, which is in this case being Latino or being a female. So that's my advice. Go for it.
Wonderful. Gia?
To have confidence in yourself and to trust that you know better than anyone else, and don't let that go, because that is so dangerous if you can lose trust in yourself. And it's a journey to find that.
I know.
It is truly the time. Yulene, why don't you take us home?
I think it's really difficult to start making cinema. What I would recommend to any young aspiring filmmaker is to start making films with the things you have around you, with your own life, your own experience. Don't wait till you have lots of money or recognition or producers who will help you to make your films. You just have to do it by yourself, in an environment where you can feel safe and secure, and just go for it. And I think everybody's special. It doesn't matter if you're Latino, American, white, black, whatever. Everybody's special. Everybody has something to say. And identity can be also a weird thing. I had an experience where I did a film in Canada, for example, that sadly wasn't shown in Canada in any film festivals because it was directed by a Latina woman. But it also didn't appear in the Latino film festivals because it was shot in Canada. So it wasn't representing the Latino content that people is looking for in a Latino film festival. So it's really weird, no? And suddenly I was making a film in Canada as a Latino woman, whatever, but it didn't find the right place just because it's a nationality mixed or identity mixture between many things. So I think we don't have to classify everything. We have to be more open, and everything is allowed in cinema. In cinema, we don't have rules. So everything is possible.
Absolutely. And I think,
yes. That I think it's also, we're in a time of like amazing technology, and it's so accessible in so many ways. And to what Yulene was saying is that like you don't need money and the best of the best in order to make and tell your story. And if you can connect with one person in your story, then that's worth everything.
I agree completely. It's democratic now, right? We don't have the controls that existed back then. I always say that, you know, some of the most biggest writers in the world are female. Biggest, like J.K. Rowling. And she got there because she didn't ask permission to anybody to become a writer. She just decided to write. And that's not been the case with filmmakers. So, you know, we needed all these things, but right now it is the time. If you have a story to tell, just go for it. It'll find a place.
I think it was your grandfather is Francis Ford Coppola, who said in an interview when he was talking about Apocalypse Now, I think, he said that the cinema of the future is going to be made by a fat little girl from Ohio with a video camera, and that's going to be the next cinema, the real art. He said something like that. I don't know, maybe I invent a little part of that, but I think he was totally right, and that's the cinema that we are also seeing right now. And those are the possibilities right now.
Yeah, I think it's so much about just being flexible and embracing change. And if you can do that, that helps so much.
Trusting yourself.
Trust, confidence. going outside of the box and supporting each other, I think are all really incredible lessons from this conversation. Thank you all so much. It's been such a joy and honor to have this conversation with you. And thank you to the Guadalajara Film Festival. We are excited to bring these conversations to all of the audiences and all of your work too, so we can keep watching these groundbreaking stories. Thanks so much, everyone.
Your movie is spectacular. I loved
Thank
it.
you.
And Gia, I'm going to start watching your movie soon. Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you.